Oh, your side.
1847, Russian.
Russell. He's going to start.
Youth from Russia.
Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to the freedom to be enslaved. Our first talk from our not so guest, who is no longer a guest. Zach is not a guest to Chabad Dingley anymore. He is a member of our community. So we're very privileged to have him do a talk for us tonight. This is a talk which is being done both on Zoom and in person. So if you have any questions, Zach, any questions? Yeah, maybe at the end, tell how you do. And Zach is one of the friendliest people you know. He has a smile on his face always. He's a brilliant educator. He has taught many subjects, including English, history, and Jewish studies. And he today runs the Jewish studies. He's the head of Jewish studies in Dingley. Dingley has got the top school in VC in the States. So to be the Jewish studies, of course, the Jewish studies is the most important part. So he runs the most important element of one of the top schools in Australia. So with no further ado, presenting the freedom to be enslaved, Mr. Zach Gomo. Thank you so much, Rabbi Ella, Chaimushka, and everybody here for coming, for inviting me to speak. It's really great to have a in-person crowd as well as a Zoom crowd. It's been too long, so it's nice it's really, really nice. So this might seem like a bit of an obscure topic, the one that I'm going to speak about tonight. It's certainly not something that you hear a lot about, but I think that when we delve into the intricacies of the history of the Jewish community of East Germany, it's a small story, but it's a fascinating story with incredibly significant lessons to teach us. I've called this talk The Freedom to be Enslaved. I originally delved into this area when I wrote an article on Pesach, and the link there to me was quite evident, but I hope you'll find that it makes sense why I chose that title by the end. So I want to take you to a point in time. The point in time in 1945, when World War II in Europe at least ended. And this is a photo here of Nuremberg, a photo of Cologne, a photo of Dresden. And this is very much reflective of cities in Germany and throughout Europe as a whole. This is a world destroyed, a world in ashes. And for many people, there was the sense, a strong feeling that a new world could be rebuilt out of those ashes. Here we have a photo at the River Elbe when the Soviet and American armies met, and here are Soviet and American soldiers embracing each other. And I have absolutely no evidence for this whatsoever, only a creation of my own mind. But when I look at this, it seems to me that these two soldiers right here, one American, one Soviet, both kind of have a bit of Jewish look about them. And in my imagination, I imagine these are two Jewish soldiers, one American, one Soviet embracing. I have no evidence for that. That may well not be the case. But to me, that's reflective of this idea that Nazi Germany has been defeated. and a new world with new superpowers is really coming to build something in its place. I think it's important at this point to note, and it's something that's often overlooked. We all know the scale of World War II, how significant these losses were, how significant the deaths were. The United States, the United Kingdom, each lost somewhere between 400 and 450,000 people in this war each, which is obviously an incomprehensibly large number, but almost pales into insignificance compared to Soviet losses, which were conservatively 20 million people. Some estimates are substantially more than that. We think, in the United States, greatest generation that fought World War II, 400,000 deaths, incomprehensible as a tragedy. Take that to 20 million, it defies all belief. And one small statistic that I think really highlights that, Soviet males born in 1923 had a 20% chance of being alive in 1945. 20% of Soviet men born in 1923 were alive in 1945, a demographic impact that exists until today. Just to be clear on how significant that is. Here's a photo of an African-American soldier in the American Armed Forces taking a large group of Nazi soldiers captive. I mean, these are almost prophetic scenes in comparison to what the Nazi regime was and what their aims and beliefs were. And here we have Jewish soldiers from the United States Army as well, praying in a building that is still covered in its Nazi era decoration. But the Nazi era was over and it wasn't. It wasn't like a light bulb was switched and after World War II ends, there are no more Nazis. They all disappear. They're all in prison. They're all executed. It couldn't be further from the truth. Kurt Kaisinger was the German chancellor, elected in 1966, and it came out shortly after he was elected that he had indeed been a member of the Nazi Party, and that didn't prevent him being the chancellor of West Germany. In 1957, 77% of the leadership of the West German Justice Ministry had been Nazi Party members. That was a higher percentage than any point in time in which the Nazis were in power. So in 1957, more of the senior judges, ministry officials in German justice ministry had been members of the Nazi Party than when the Nazis were the ruling party of Germany. Give you a sense. This is a famous photo of a German woman in the West German parliament in Bonn, screaming out this very point that there are just Nazis, former Nazis, war criminals, walking around free, not hiding, running the country. But this wasn't just a problem in West Germany. Werner von Braun was the leader of the Nazi rocket program, the V2 rocket program. Here he is here with a number of other senior Nazi officials and army officers. And he was the lead scientist who developed the V2 rocket, which was used most infamously to bomb a number of Allied cities, but London in particular, causing significant widespread destruction. What's most horrific about the V2 rocket program, if something could be more horrific than this, is that substantially more people died making the V2 rocket than were killed by it. Because the V2 rocket was developed in the Dora concentration camp, where Jewish prisoners were in forced labor made to produce this Nazi weapon, and enormous numbers of them were killed, somewhere between 40 and 50,000. I happen to have particular interest in this because my grandfather, who I showed a photo of not long ago, was actually a prisoner in the Dora camp where the V2 rockets were created. And I'm sorry these images are a bit shocking, but this is the time that we're talking about. Enormous numbers of people murdered to produce the V2 rocket. And the world knew about this, and certainly the American army and government knew about this, because it was the American army that liberated the Dora concentration camp and forced the Germans to bury the Jewish victims of their crimes. And everybody knew who Werner von Braun was too. Here he is in the Nazi SS Death Head's uniform. He was a member of the SS Death's Head Battalion. It's not a great photo of him, but what's most significant about it is that right in front of him is Heinrich Himmler, one of the leading Nazi war criminals and founder and leader of the SS. But was Werner von Braun tried for his crime, punished in any way, imprisoned, executed? Not at all. Infamously, Operation Paperclip, he and leading other Nazi rocket scientists were saved by the United States government, given fake identities, hence the term paperclip over the identities they had, and taken to the United States. Werner von Braun was the leader and director of NASA's rocket program. Here he is in his NASA office, one of the most senior NASA officials ever, an extremely prominent man. Here he is with Walt Disney, who was very intrigued in his work and his scientific events, and none of this was hidden. The Smithsonian Institute, one of the leading educational museums institutes in the United States, made a film about rocket science, starring Werner von Braun. And here he is riding in the limousine of none other than American President JFK. These people weren't hidden. They went aside. If you want to say it's just JFK, here he is with President Eisenhower. And here are 104 former Nazi rocket scientists in 1946 in Texas, where they were saved, protected, promoted by the United States government. And here is Kurt Debus, one of the leading V2 scientists as well, sitting in between JFK and Lyndon Johnson, American Vice President, later President, Robert McNamara, American Secretary of Defense, in NASA headquarters. These people were celebrated public figures. These were the people who sent America to the moon. Here's Werner von Braun with a plaque of honor being established for him in the United States. Until today, in Huntsville, Alabama, there is the von Braun Center, a massive public sporting, art, and cultural precinct. In West Germany in 1979, there was a school built in his name, the von Braun School. But in 2012, Nazi concentration camp survivor, Jewish survivor, David Salz gave a speech, and he said, quote, "Do everything to make this name disappear from the school." And in 2014, the name was changed, and the principal said that von Braun was no longer a role model for upwards pupils. Not in the United States. The von Braun Center still there. But it wasn't just Nazi war criminals. Discrimination against Jews of all kinds in the United States and throughout the Western world continued for many years after the end of the Holocaust in World War II. Here's a typical example of a swimming club, a country club in the United States. Privileges of the swimming pool are extended only to approved Gentiles, meaning not to Jews. Or blacks, certainly. McGill and Yale University, McGill being the most prominent and famous university in Canada, Yale University being one of the top Ivy League schools, only entered their Jewish quotas in the 60s. It was only in the 60s that they officially stopped limiting the number of Jewish students. And in 1935, Dean of the Yale University said, and I quote, "Never admit more than 5 Jews, take only 2 Italians, and take no blacks at all."
My goodness.
And finally, in 1950s, the Rosenbergs, husband and wife, a tribe for spying against the United States or the Soviet Union. Now, there was a great fear of communism at the time. Many people were tried, a lot of them Jews. But the Rosenbergs, who professed their innocence until their deaths, were the only American citizens to be executed for the crime or alleged crime of spying from the Soviet Union, which many felt was a particularly anti-Semitic act. That was the perception that many Jews, certainly at least, had at the time. So if you're feeling a little bit angry, frustrated, like the world at this point was unjust, you're not alone. Many people, many Jews felt that exact same way. Now, just to give a little bit of context in case people aren't familiar, obviously we're speaking after World War II in the era known as the Cold War. You have a great ideological battle between the Western capitalist democratic world, whatever you want to call it, led by the United States, and the communist world in the East, led by the Soviet Union. And they were dividing the world, and they were dividing Germany. There were the Allied zones in the West, which became the state of West Germany, with its capital in Bonn, and there was the communist or Soviet-occupied zone in the East that became known as the German Democratic Republic. Ironically, people say it was certainly German, but it wasn't democratic and it wasn't a republic, but that's what it was called, with Berlin in the center, which itself was divided between a Soviet zone in the East and a Western zone in the West. And in 1949, indeed, this country, East Germany, comes into existence. Now, East Germany is founded on the belief, the myth, whatever you want to call it, that East Germany is the anti-Nazi regime. That unlike West Germany, the United States, the West, who harbor Nazis, who support Nazis, who are Nazis, East Germany was the Germans who had always fought the Nazis, the Germans who had opposed Nazism. When looking at the idea of paying war reparations to Jews after World War II, all of those reparations came from West Germany. East Germany didn't pay them because when asked, they said, we're not the Nazis. We were their victims too. We are the archetypal anti-fascist state. We are going to create a new world based on genuine equality and freedom. Now, this was all kind of muddied by the fact that the country, when I said it was not really a republic or democratic, was really controlled, at least in the early years, by the Soviet Union. There were portions of Stalin. This was not a free state by any means. Nonetheless, the message was felt. And there was not a surprising, I should say, number of Jews throughout the world, many of them Holocaust survivors, who heard this message of East Germany, the country of freedom, of anti-Nazism, and said, this is where I need. The West, still racist, still anti-Semitic. The solution to my problem as an individual Jew is a country that is past nationalism, past religion, that is truly a society of men. And I want to bring a few examples. This is a woman named Lynn Yeldati. She was actually a Dutch Holocaust survivor. She was the last person to see Anne Frank alive in Bergen-Belsen concentration. They were both Dutch Jews, and she was quite a famous Yiddish singer, secular Yiddish singer. And she moved to East Germany in an attempt to, again, kind of run away from her Jewish identity, run away from anti-Semitism by running away from Judaism, in a sense. But bizarrely became a state-sponsored East German Yiddish singer. And she was sent by the East German government to places not limited to Moscow, China, North Korea, Thailand, Indonesia, India, communist Vietnam throughout the 50s, 60s, and 70s, where she performed exclusively in Yiddish. Okay. Hans Eisler was an extremely famous Austrian composer who fled Nazi anti-Semitism to the United States. He wrote the music for Bertolt Brecht's plays, very famous playwright. In America, he was a very famous composer in Hollywood. He was nominated for several Oscars, and eventually in this wave of anti-communism / anti-Semitic persecution, he was actually accused of being a communist and exiled from the United States. He was exiled from America. Charlie Chaplin was a famous supporter of his who actually advocated for him to be able to stay, but it didn't work. And he moved to East Germany, where he actually wrote the East German national anthem. But he soon became delusioned with the state in Germany, and we'll see why in a moment. And he died of depression / some believe he might have been pushed along his way by the East Germans. Because indeed, despite the idea that East Germany would be this socialist utopia, it became something closer to a living nightmare. Perhaps most infamously, the East German government was terrified by the fact that people were fleeing East Germany, particularly through Berlin. Remember, Berlin was a divided city. Half the city was west, half the city was east. And initially, it was easy for East Germaners walking to West Germany, and that's it. You're in West Germany, and literally almost everybody who had an education or ambition, young, talented people were leaving, and East Germany was generally terrified that the country wasn't going to survive. So in 1961, they created the Berlin Wall. Here's quite a famous photo of one of the soldiers as the wall just being put up, an East German soldier actually jumping to freedom to the west, one of the East German soldiers who was supposed to be keeping people in. And it was initially a concrete wall that was continuously expanded. And by 1983, it looked like this. It wasn't just one concrete wall. The concrete wall that you often see was actually the one on the border with West Germany, but a huge arrays of traps, of bunkers, of wire, of patrols, of guards, of automatic firing guns that killed a few hundred people that tried to escape. Landmines trying to protect, and it's one of the only incidences in history where a government has built a defense of this type, not to protect itself from external attack, but to keep their own population in. All of the measures were not aimed out, they were aimed in. But to indicate how Orwellian, or how much doublespeak East Germany had, they didn't call this the Berlin Wall. They called this the anti-fascist protection rampart. And the line was, we have to protect our population from fascism, the Nazism of the West. And this regime in East Germany was really, as we're going to see, one of the most extreme and barbaric regimes that has existed in the modern era. That's not an understatement. And the regime was really enforced by an organization known as the East German Secret Police. Number two in the East German Secret Police for decades, perhaps its most famous and successful operator, and the head of their foreign espionage wing was none other than Marcus Wolf, another German-born Jew who fled with his family to the Soviet Union when the Nazis came to power, was raised, his nickname was Mischa Wolf, in communist Russia, and was brought back to East Germany to be officially the number two, head of the foreign directory, but really the most significant member of the East German Secret Police, Stasi. According to Yossi Melman, who's an Israeli intelligence expert, Wolf is considered to be one of the most talented, daring, and brilliant intelligence operatives in the 20th century, particularly during the Cold War period. His character has been documented in dozens of books, documentary films, and Hollywood-style action movies. He was called the man without face and is considered one of the most successful spy masters, not only of the Cold War, but ever in human history. And he really was successful if you're willing to use that word term with very, very broad parameters. And I've got a quote here from Hubertus, I'm sorry, I'm horrible with the German name, but Hubertus Knabe, a German historian. And he says here the following: the Stasi often used a method which was really diabolical. It was called a Zerzutzung. Sure, I'm mispronouncing. The word is difficult to translate because it means originally biodegradation, but actually it's quite accurate a description. The goal was to destroy secretly the self-confidence of people, for example, by damaging their reputation, by organizing failures in their work, and by destroying their personal relationships. Considering this, East Germany was a very modern dictatorship. The Stasi didn't try to arrest every dissident. It preferred to paralyze it. And it could do so because it had access to so much personal information and to so many institutions. The Stasi spied on everyone. They had husbands informing on wives, children informing on their parents, neighbors informing on neighbor, cameras and recording equipment in people's homes. But the methods were truly diabolical. One of the things that they used to like to do was, again, not have to arrest everybody in the country, but if somebody spoke badly against the regime, didn't even want to overthrow the regime, but literally said the regime could be improved, they would destroy them from inside. Examples of what they would do is break into somebody's apartment when they were at work and do nothing but change the type of tea in their drawer. You drink Earl Grey, they'll put English breakfast in. What's going to happen? You'll come home from work, you'll go make yourself a cup of tea, and you'll say, I've only ever drunk Earl Grey. I buy Earl Grey, this is breakfast. What are the possibilities? You're going to go to your friends, your neighbors, and say, the Stasi's spying on me, they're persecuting me. Oh, sure, what's the evidence? They changed my tea. If you don't think you're mad, if you don't lose your own mind, everybody else will be certain that you have. And then when you start speaking about improving the regime, it's all going to sound as crazy as each other. This was really genuinely insidious. They would send to husbands and wives supposed love letters from other romantic partners that didn't exist to destroy your marriage. They would take people's children away and give them to more loyal party members. This was an insidious regime. Anybody familiar with this couple? Maybe some famous rock stars or Hollywood actors? No, these were arch terrorists Andreas Baader and Ulrich Meinhof, the leaders of the Red Army faction, a West Germany-based communist terrorist group that killed many people, all supported by the Stasi. The Stasi in East Germany would support communist terrorist groups throughout the world. They supported people like Muammar Gaddafi in Libya, the Libyan dictator, Idi Amin, who infamously was the dictator of Uganda, accused of being a cannibal, that's neither confirmed nor denied, but certainly was the one who hosted the Entebbe terrorists that had the famous hostage rescue, all supported by the Stasi. The Black September terrorists in the Munich Olympic Games that held and eventually murdered the Israeli Olympic team, how did they get the weapons, the funding, the training, the access, the knowledge to penetrate West Germany from the Stasi? Again, you've got to realize and remember, this is all under the command of Markus Wolf, a Jew who had fled Nazi German anti-Semitism. Perhaps most shockingly, the officially anti-Nazi state went to enormous lengths to fund and support neo-Nazi groups throughout Germany, America, England, and the Western world. Why would they do this? Because their whole claim was the West was fascist. So the more fascism, the more Nazism you can point to there, the more that proof that seems to be true, regardless if they are the ones causing it or not. Again, I would say Markus Wolf is the one running. Now, if you want to say this is a bit of a stretch in comparison to Nazi Germany, that it's just come to an end, this isn't so bad, don't take my word for it. Simon Wiesenthal, the most famous Nazi hunter and himself a Holocaust survivor, said of the Stasi, the East German secret police, the Stasi, this is himself, was much worse than the Gestapo, the Nazi era secret police. if you consider only the oppression of its own people. The Gestapo had 40,000 officials watching a country of 80 million, while the Stasi employed 102,000 to control only 17 million. They not only terrorized their own people worse than the Gestapo, but the government was the most anti-Semitic and anti-Israel of the entire Eastern Bloc. They did nothing to help the West in tracking down Nazi criminals. They ignored all requests from West German authorities. We have just discovered shelves of files on Nazis stretching over 4 miles. Now we know how the Stasi used those files. They blackmailed Nazi criminals who fled abroad after the war into spying for them. What's more, the Stasi trained terrorists from all over the world. When considering paid employees and part-time and voluntary informants, the Stasi had one person surveying every 6.5 people in East Germany. One for every 6.5. But it wasn't only former Nazis that they used to do their spying. This is a story. Salome Genin, born in Germany in 1932, Jewish, flees the Nazis with her parents to Melbourne, Australia. Grows up right here, where she experiences anti-Semitism and a perception of inequality, and she says the West is not where I want to be. And in 1954, she decides she will move to Germany, the socialist paradise, where she will escape, again, anti-Semitism by escaping her identity. But she's denied entry. The East Germans say, we don't want you. She's so committed that she spies for the Stasi in West Germany for 10 years until she convinces them to take her in. She moves to East Germany. She has dreams of being a history teacher. But there too, she faces anti-Semitism. Her 2 sons that she has with a East German man come home from school bloody, beaten, and bruised. They didn't even know they were Jewish. But the other kids knew. And she becomes despondent. She finds that in East Germany, she's not free to live as a Jew. Religion and Judaism certainly were banned, but she's also practically banned, prohibited from not being born. She said, and I quote, I tried to get rid of the Jewish identity to become German. And then my world broke down when I realized I will never become German because I am different, whether is something quite incredible that she said. The anti-Semitism of the Nazis had taught me that I was Jewish burden. In 1991, this is when East Germany ceased to exist. Berlin Wall falls, East Germany ceases, Germany unites. And she says, I went to Jerusalem for 6 months to find out what this all meant to me. There I had the same dream twice. I was trudging through the world with a heavy stone on my left shoulder, looking for a place to put it down. It was a well-honed heavy stone, beautifully smooth. The first time I woke up in the middle of the night, I couldn't find a place. The next night, I dreamt the same thing, and there I saw a beautifully green, well-cut hedge. And at the bottom of the hedge, I saw a hole, which was exactly the size of the stone that I was carrying. So I put it down, pushed it into the hole, and woke up. And I knew that stone was my being Jewish. That's the burden I've been carrying all my life, and now I've found a place to put it. And now I know it's not awful to be Jewish. It is something that I can and should celebrate. So that's what I've been trying to do ever since 1992, when I had that dream. She's still alive. She still lives in Berlin. She is now a member in the United Berlin, United Germany, of the Berlin Jewish community. What a trajectory, what an experience, what a life. Hans Eisler was rehabilitated in a sense after Germany United to the Hans Eisler Academy of Music, the most prestigious music school in Germany, named after him. And here is Yalda Reblin, the daughter of Lynn Yildati, that Yiddish singer who had tried to escape her Jewish identity. Well, her daughter now is living openly as a Jew as a member of the Jewish community in Berlin. This is a photo of her in synagogue. Really, things have turned around for many of these people, and perhaps most unbelievably, Marcus Wolf. So in 1996, he's since passed away. Marcus Wolf actually visited Israel as well. And this is the man who had funded, trained, and supported Black September, murdering Israeli athletes, neo-Nazis, etc. He visits Israel.
Didn't they convert?
No, this guy was Jewish. He'd been Jewish all along.
Oh.
Yeah. And he turns around and says that he always had a special feeling for the Jewish state and tried to protect it from the brunt of East German aggression. And I quote, "I would not describe myself as a reborn Jew. This would be presumptuous and no one would believe me. But like many older people who are interested in where they come from, I'm interested in my own roots." What to make of that with his history and his experience, I don't know. But it's interesting that for all of these individuals, despite everything in Judaism they've run away from, everything they tried to give and commit to this East German state, the East German state goes, and their Jewish identity, the one they never wanted to have, is the only one they have left. And we often have the misconception, I think, that assimilation is a modern phenomenon. That it's something new that until 100 years ago, or until World War II, or until the Enlightenment, Jews didn't assimilate. But that's simply not true. Assimilation has been a phenomenon of great significance throughout Jewish history. And perhaps nothing indicates that as much as the episode of the Spanish Inquisition. As some of you might know, this is Thomas de Tucumana, the Grand Inquisitor. The Spanish Inquisition, despite popular understanding, did not inquisite one Jew. The Spanish Inquisition had no jurisdiction whatsoever over Jews. In fact, 12 years after the Inquisition was established, there was the Alhambra Decree, 1492, when Jews are expelled from Spain. Jews have a choice, convert or leave. Anybody who's openly Jewish is no longer in Spain. The Inquisition was to inquire if what they called new Christians or converts from Judaism to Christianity were still secretly practicing Judaism. Again, the numbers are disputed, they're argued, but it seems like it's almost certain that more Jews in Spain chose to convert to Judaism instead than were expelled. Now, I'm not here to judge. One can certainly understand that in a circumstance of living in one of the most sophisticated societies on earth and going into the void, into the unknown, who can blame somebody for having a inclination to stay at whatever cost? But look at what happens here. Spanish, they convert or leave. The Jews convert, but for generations, they are persecuted, tortured, and accused your conversion wasn't. You might not know it, but we know deep down you're still. What's perhaps most bizarre is that Thomas Tucumana was himself the grandson of conversion. This is a man who was halakhically Jewish. And he himself, in 1832, the Inquisition ended in 1834. Spanish Inquisition ended. How long? Generation after generation. 1832, 2 years before the Inquisition is over, Thomas Tucumana's bones himself are undug and burned in an Inquisition ritual known as auto de fe. You can be the Grand Inquisitor of the Catholic Church in Spain, persecuting people who ostensibly had converted from Judaism to Catholicism, a Catholic priest, and you will still be accused of being a Jew. So I think, for me, what is the message really is summed up by Gedden when she spoke about that whole Natan Sharansky, the famous prisoner of Zion, was a prisoner in the Soviet Union for many, many years, said that a Jew can attempt to flee their Jewish identity and become a member of humanity. But humanity will not see you as such, and all you will have done is lost your Jewish identity. I think the lesson of East Germany is so obviously clear in the history of the Jews there, is that Judaism can be seen as a burden if you wish. You can see it as the thing impeding things that you want to achieve in your life. And I'm not here to judge. Certainly, history is very clear. Being Jewish carries a price. Sometimes that price is life itself. But the idea that you can wish your way out of that, it's just simply not true. All that happens, I cannot guarantee that living as a Jew doesn't come with costs and a price to pay. It does. But is life lived to escape that price, or is that price actually what gives meaning and significance to life itself and makes the trials and tribulations and difficulties that we all experience meaningful and worthwhile? I think to me that message is incredibly clear. So I don't know how much time. I think I've been a little bit short, but I'll definitely happily take questions if there are. To me, I think that's a very significant lesson, and that initial title, the freedom to be enslaved. I hope that's clear now why I chose that as that term. So thank you very, very much. Thank you. Any questions from the audience or from?
Okay, if anybody has any questions, whether you're on Zoom or live, anybody for questions?
Could you give us an indication?
I think
If you-
there. Yeah.
The Jews in East Germany, what percentage, do you have any indication of what percentage of those went to Israel?
Of Jews that left East Germany at some point and went to Israel?
Yes.
I'm not sure. It's a very good question. I don't have that on hand. We are talking about a very small number of people in total. First of all, in Germany in general, by 1945, there simply aren't that many Jews. And of those that are there, in East Germany, most don't remain. But yes, I don't have the exact percentage. I would have suggested that whilst East Germany still existed until 1991, almost none, because you couldn't leave. Very few people were ever allowed to leave East Germany.
Okay, the influence of the Soviet Secret Service, if you like, on the Stasi.
Okay, what was the influence of the Soviet Secret Service and the Stasi? Certainly it existed. Certainly people like Marcus Wolf or Misha Wolf learned many of his tricks of the trade in the Soviet Union before coming to East Germany, and they had a very, very solid relationship. But by many people, it's definitely felt that the two, the Stasi was the more extreme, was the more committed, was the more, yes, in many, many ways.
An interesting debate with you on that.
Well, we could speak, but that's certainly the impression that many had. In 90 or 91, very, very shortly after East Germany fell, there was actually it must have been in 89, actually, a 40-year celebration of the founding of East Germany in 1949. And this was in Berlin, and there was a great parade. And Gorbachev, the Soviet premier, was there. And famously, the German crowd was yelling, "Gorby, save us." They were asking Gorbachev and the Soviet Union to save them from the East German regime. So much was the consideration that the Soviets were less extreme than the East Germans. Yeah.
It's an interesting point.
Yeah. So,
How many Jews lived in East Germany?
so the question was, how many Jews lived in East Germany? And we're talking about small numbers. Nobody has exact figures. Also, again, because the majority of those that would have remained were people who presumably survived the Nazi period and were not openly Jewish, and then were not so in the East German period either. So it's difficult to say, but it wouldn't have been large numbers. We're talking about, fluctuating between hundreds and thousands, not more.
You talk about anti-Semitism in Europe, but I remember my great uncle. He started something because of the anti-Semitism here in Victoria.
Right.
In golf clubs.
Yeah.
A lot of Jews could never join or play in private golf clubs.
Yeah.
My great uncle started a golf club. It was going to be a Jewish sports centre, but that didn't eventuate. But he started a Jewish golf club. That was, which is now the Cranbourne Golf Club. I don't know whether you realise that the Cranbourne Golf Club was started originally as one that would welcome Jews because it was going to be a Jewish golf club, predominantly a Jewish golf club. And I remember going there as a kid, seeing the first ball hit by the golf professional for the Cranbourne Golf Club, which was a guy called Ozzie Pickworth, not Jewish, by the way, but he hit the first ball on the golf course at Cranbourne Golf Club, and I was there and I saw that. So that's there was things. And spies. You talk about spies. When I got married, I didn't realise it until a few years later, but the people who lived at the back of me were Russian spies.
Okay, there you go.
No, because we saw the police, the Australian Commonwealth Police, quite frequently at the back of us there. You know who they were? Very famous spies. They were the Petrovs. They went under a different name, but the Petrovs actually lived at the back of us in East Bentley. And they were predominantly Russian spies until the Russians tried to get them out of the country and take them back to stand trial.
Yeah. Interesting times. Interesting times. Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? Okay. So thank you to Zach. And would you say, does anybody on Zoom have any questions for Zach?
No questions.
Anybody want to ask any questions?
I just wanted to thank Zach for letting us hear all of that. It was wonderful to listen in and see you live. And yeah, thank you very much, Zach. This is Hazel.
Thank you, Hazel. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Hazel.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else before we shut off? Okay.
Thank you,
So
Zach.
that was the first of
Bye-bye.
many we've got.
Anytime. Anytime.
So we know that whenever Zach speaks, we'll be in for something special. Yeah, thanks, Zach. That was awesome. That was great. And if you have any other further questions, feel free to send them in to myself, and I'll forward them on to Zach. And thanks for coming. Thanks for joining online or in person. And we'll see you all soon. Have a wonderful night. Okay.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Night.
Good night. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks.